The holographic notification flared to life above Samuel Drake's cluttered workbench, casting flickering blue light across the half-assembled propulsion system he'd been fine-tuning. His heart stopped as he recognized the emblem of the Interstellar Coalition glowing at the top of the projection. "No," he muttered, his hands frozen mid-reach for his tools. "No, no, no." The message was as brief as it was devastating. "Congratulations. You have been selected for the mandatory Alien Brides program. Your genetic profile has been matched with a Coalition citizen. Reporting for processing is required within 48 hours. Samuel slumped back in his chair, running his fingers through his unruly brown hair. The comforting hum of machinery in the workshop suddenly felt stifling. 3 months ago, when humanity first made contact with the Interstellar Coalition and learned of their so-called cultural exchange program, Samuel had dismissed it as someone else's problem. And yet, here he was drafted into an arranged marriage with something he'd never met. He jabbed the appeal button on the holographic notice. Appeal status: denied. Grounds for appeal: none available. Selection is final and binding under Earth Coalition Treaty, Article 8. Samuel slammed his fist onto the workbench, rattling the tools. "I'm an engineer, damn it. I design propulsion systems. I'm not some diplomatic breeding project." The sound of footsteps made him glance up. His supervisor, Dr. Elena Cho, stood in the doorway, her expression cautious. "I heard yelling," she said, crossing her arms. "Bad news?" Samuel gestured bitterly at the hovering hologram. "I've been drafted into the stupid program." Elena's brows furrowed, but she quickly masked her reaction with a neutral expression. "Well, congratulations." "Don't." Samuel pushed himself up from his chair and began pacing. "There has to be a way out of this. Maybe I could resign, leave Earth." "You know that won't work." Elena's voice was soft but firm. "The treaty applies to all Earth citizens, no exceptions. And let's not forget the Coalition's technology is the only thing keeping the hostile Draxan, Krivix, and Zell colonies from wiping us out." Samuel groaned, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "I know. I never thought it'd be me." The next 2 days blurred into a whirlwind of invasive medical screenings and endless cultural briefings. Samuel absorbed only fragments of the information about Coalition traditions, his mind too preoccupied with the looming reality. In a matter of hours, he'd be marrying an alien stranger. When the time came, the processing center loomed ahead of him, a shimmering tower of alien design that seemed to defy physics, its organic curves flowing seamlessly into sharp, crystalline edges. Adjusting the stiff collar of the ceremonial suit they'd given him, Samuel felt like he was walking into his own execution. "Mr. Drake," a human liaison greeted him, her tablet in hand. "Your match has arrived. Please follow me." The meeting chamber was designed to be neutral, with plush seating around a low table. But Samuel's attention snapped immediately to the figure standing near the window. If woman was the right word for her. Her skin was a rich violet hue that seemed to shimmer faintly as she moved, catching the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, cascaded down her back in loose waves. Though her features were humanoid, they were impossibly symmetrical, refined to a level of beauty that felt almost unreal. When she turned, her silver eyes caught the light, shifting with faint hints of blue and green. "Hello, Samuel," she said, her voice melodic and carrying a lilting accent he couldn't place. "I'm Julie." Her lips curved into a smile, warm and diplomatic at once. Samuel realized he was staring. Hi," he managed to say, inwardly cursing himself for such a pathetic response. Julie's smile widened. "You seem nervous." "Don't worry, I don't bite." She tilted her head, her expression playfully curious. "Unless that's something humans enjoy." Samuel nearly choked. Julie's soft laughter filled the room, a sound that was both musical and oddly soothing. "That was a joke," she said, stepping closer. "I've been studying human humor." "How did I do?" Samuel chuckled despite himself. "Not bad. Though, maybe save the biting jokes for after the first meeting." "Noted," Julie said, gesturing to the seating area. "Shall we talk? I imagine you have questions." "I know I do." As they sat, Samuel noticed faint, intricate patterns shifting beneath her violet skin, as if her body were alive with subtle energy. "Yeah, I have questions," he said, leaning forward. "Starting with why me? I mean, look at you." He gestured awkwardly at her entire being. "And look at me. I'm just an engineer." Julie raised an elegant eyebrow. "Just an engineer? You're one of Earth's foremost experts in quantum propulsion systems. Your work on zero-point field theories is groundbreaking." Samuel blinked. "You've read my research?" "Of course. Did you think this was random?" Her silver eyes locked onto his, intense and sincere. "I chose you, Samuel. You chose me," he repeated, struggling to process the revelation. "I thought these matches were made by some algorithm." "They are for most participants," Julie admitted, leaning back gracefully. "But as the daughter of a coalition ambassador, I was granted more flexibility in the selection process." The human liaison cleared her throat from the doorway. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted," she said, stepping out and closing the door behind her. Samuel stared at Julie. "So let me get this straight. You read my research and decided to marry me? Just like that?" Julie's expression softened, and for the first time, Samuel saw a hint of vulnerability in her otherwise regal demeanor. "Your work shows creativity, determination, and an ability to see beyond conventional limits. Those qualities are rare in any species." She paused, her voice quieter now. "And I wanted the chance to choose my own path, even if it leads me far from home." Samuel couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. "And Earth doesn't seem, I don't know, primitive to you?" Julie laughed lightly, her eyes sparkling. "Primitive? You developed faster-than-light theory without quantum mapping. Do you know how extraordinary that is? Your species achieves the impossible simply because you refuse to accept that it's impossible. Most people just call it stubborn," Samuel muttered, scratching the back of his neck. Julie stood and moved to the window, motioning for him to join her. Reluctantly, he did. The city stretched out before them, a chaotic blend of human and alien architecture. "What do you see?" she asked. "A mess," Samuel admitted. "Nothing fits. The styles clash." "It's wrong." Julie's gaze remained fixed on the view. "I see possibility. Two civilizations learning to coexist, finding solutions together." She turned to face him, her expression earnest. "That's what this program is about, Samuel. Not just alliances or genetics. It's about proving we can build something new together." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Samuel felt the enormity of what she was saying. This wasn't just about them. It was about the future of both their worlds. "I should warn you," he said, breaking the tension with a small smile. "I'm terrible at formal events. I once spilled coffee on my company's CEO." Julie's lips twitched. "I once accidentally called an ambassador's ceremonial robe a fungal growth. Turns out it was a compliment in their culture." Samuel laughed, the sound easing some of the tension in his chest. The chime of a door interrupted them. The liaison re-entered, tablet in hand. "If you're ready, we can begin the preliminary bonding ceremony." Samuel's pulse quickened. "Already? Don't we need more time?" Julie placed a reassuring hand on his arm, her touch warm. "We'll have the full ceremonial bonding later, with family present. This is just the legal part." Samuel took a deep breath. For the first time since receiving the notification, he felt a glimmer of hope. "Okay, let's do this." Samuel stood in the ceremonial chamber, his pulse hammering in his ears. The room was minimalist but elegant, with a domed ceiling that shimmered like a star-filled sky. At the center, a low pedestal held a crystalline device glowing faintly with energy, an artifact Julie had called the Sealing Nexus. It was ancient, she'd explained, a relic of the Coalition's founding. Julie stood beside him, her posture as poised as ever, but when Samuel glanced at her face, he caught a flicker of unease in her eyes. She was nervous too. Somehow, that comforted him. The human liaison, whose name Samuel still hadn't caught, stepped forward, tablet in hand. She cleared her throat with the kind of brisk efficiency Samuel had come to associate with bureaucrats. "This preliminary bonding ceremony will establish your legal union under coalition law," she said. "The Nexus will create a bio-link between you, serving as both a symbol and a foundation for deeper compatibility. The process is painless. She hesitated. Mostly, Samuel asked sharply. Julie shot the liaison a sharp look. It's safe. The discomfort is minimal. Samuel didn't feel reassured. But before he could object further, the liaison continued. Please place your hands on the nexus, palm down. The device will attune to your biofields and initiate the link. Samuel exchanged a glance with Julie. She offered him a small, encouraging smile, and for a moment, the tension in his chest loosened. With a deep breath, he stepped forward and placed his hands on the cool, smooth surface of the nexus. Julie did the same, her fingers brushing his briefly. The crystal pulsed under their touch, its glow intensifying until the room was bathed in a soft, multicolored light. Samuel felt a strange warmth spreading from his palms, followed by a faint tingling that traveled up his arms and settled somewhere deep in his chest. Is it supposed to feel like? A jolt of energy cut off his words. It wasn't painful, exactly, but it was intense. He felt as if something deep within him had been nudged awake, a presence that wasn't quite his own. He gasped, glancing at Julie. Her expression was calm, but her eyes shimmered with a faint silver glow. It's the link, she said softly. Don't fight it. Let it happen. Samuel closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing. The sensation shifted, becoming less intrusive and more familiar. Like hearing a melody you didn't realize you knew. He felt something else too, a flicker of emotion that wasn't his. Curiosity, hope, and underneath it all, a quiet determination. Was that her? The light from the nexus dimmed, and the tingling sensation faded. Samuel opened his eyes to find Julie watching him intently, her gaze searching. Did it work? He asked. It worked, she said, her voice steady but soft. We're bonded now. The liaison stepped forward, her face a mask of professional indifference. The preliminary bond has been successfully established. Congratulations, Mr. Drake, Ambassador Julie. You are now legally united under coalition law. Additional ceremonies and cultural observances may be scheduled at your discretion. Samuel barely registered her words. He was too focused on the faint thread of awareness that now pulsed at the edge of his mind. It wasn't invasive, but it was there. A connection. He looked at Julie. So, what now? Her lips quirked in a wry smile. Now we figure out how to make this work. The liaison cleared her throat. If you'll follow me, I'll escort you to your new quarters. Quarters? Samuel frowned. You mean we're living together already? Julie chuckled. The bond requires proximity, at least in the early stages. Don't worry, it's a large space. You'll have your own room, right? Of course. Samuel followed the liaison out of the chamber, his mind spinning. The quarters they were assigned were unlike anything Samuel had seen before. The walls seemed to shift in color and texture depending on where you looked, and the furniture looked like it had grown out of the floor itself. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a breathtaking view of the alien cityscape below. Well, Samuel said, stepping inside and dropping his bag on the sleek, low table in the main living area. This is different. Julie entered behind him, her movements graceful as always. I wasn't sure how you'd feel about the design, so I asked for something neutral. This is neutral? He gestured at the walls, which were currently a muted gold, but shimmered faintly with streaks of violet. She shrugged, a surprisingly human gesture. It's better than some of the options. I vetoed the one with levitating furniture. Samuel chuckled, but his humor faded as he looked around. This was his life now. A new home, a new wife, and an entire galaxy of expectations he hadn't asked for. Julie seemed to sense his unease. She walked over to him, her expression thoughtful. Samuel, I know this is overwhelming. It is for me too. Doesn't seem like it, he muttered. She tilted her head, her silver eyes searching his face. You feel my calmness because of the bond, but don't mistake that for certainty. I'm figuring this out as we go, just like you. The reminder of their connection made him uncomfortable. He wasn't sure how to handle the idea that his emotions, and hers, were no longer entirely private. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice quieter now. Neither do I, Julie said simply. But we'll learn. Before he could respond, The door chimed, and a voice crackled through an unseen speaker. Ambassador Julie, Mr. Drake, your presence is requested at the Diplomatic Council meeting in 1 hour. Your participation is required as part of the integration process. Samuel groaned. Great. Nothing like jumping straight into the deep end. Julie gave him a small, reassuring smile. Consider it a trial by fire. Fantastic, he said dryly. But as they prepared to leave, Samuel couldn't help but glance at Julie. Despite everything, the surreal circumstances, the alien technology, the weight of the unknown, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't expected. Hope. The council chamber was enormous, its dome lined with holographic projections of alien starscapes. The walls shimmered with iridescent patterns that reminded Samuel of shifting oil slicks, and the air hummed faintly, as if the room itself were alive. At the center of the chamber was a large circular table, surrounded by beings from half a dozen different species. Samuel felt entirely out of place. Relax, Julie said softly beside him, sensing his tension through their bond. She was dressed in formal coalition attire. Her shimmering dark blue gown seemed to catch the light like liquid metal. Beside her, Samuel felt like a guy who'd wandered into a black-tie gala wearing his worst rental tux. I am relaxed, he muttered, tugging at the stiff collar of his regulation suit. You're projecting your nerves loud enough for the whole room to feel them, she replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Great. So now his emotions were public knowledge, too. Before he could respond, a deep, resonant voice boomed across the chamber. Ah, Ambassador Julie, and this must be your human mate. Samuel turned to see a massive, reptilian figure rising from one of the council seats. The alien's emerald scales glinted in the light, and a crown of bone-like ridges framed its predatory face. Samuel instinctively took half a step back. Counselor Vral, Julie greeted smoothly, inclining her head. May I present Samuel Drake of Earth? Samuel swallowed hard and managed to nod. Hi. Vral's golden eyes narrowed, then flicked to Julie. You have chosen an engineer? The way he said it made Samuel feel about 2 inches tall. Curious. I expected a warrior or diplomat. Samuel's expertise in quantum propulsion is highly respected on Earth, Julie said evenly. And I value intellect over brute force. Vral made a low, growling sound that Samuel couldn't interpret. Was it amusement? Disapproval? Hunger? Julie leaned closer to Samuel, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't let him intimidate you. He's testing you. Testing me for what? Samuel hissed back. To see if you're worth my time. Great. No pressure. Another voice chimed in, this one melodic and almost musical. Ambassador Julie, we look forward to hearing your insights on the integration initiative. The speaker was a tall, willowy alien with translucent skin that seemed to ripple like water. Samuel tried not to stare as the alien's fluid-like movements carried it to a seat near the center of the table. Julie inclined her head. Thank you, Counselor Even. My mate and I are honored to contribute. Samuel blinked. Mate. Every time she said it, the word hit him like a hammer. It sounded so final. The meeting began, and Samuel quickly realized he was in way over his head. The counselors launched into a discussion about interspecies trade agreements, resource allocations, and cultural preservation protocols, throwing around terms and concepts he couldn't begin to follow. Julie, however, held her own with effortless grace. Samuel found himself studying her as she spoke. How her confidence never wavered, how her tone shifted subtly, depending on which counselor she was addressing. She wasn't just answering questions. She was steering the conversation, guiding the council toward consensus. It was impressive, and a little intimidating. As the discussion wore on, Samuel noticed a growing tension in the room. The topic had shifted to Earth's integration into the coalition, and some of the counselors didn't seem thrilled about it. We are already stretching our resources to accommodate new member worlds, Vral rumbled, his golden eyes fixed on Julie. Adding another species, especially one as young and untested as humanity, risks destabilizing the coalition. Julie's expression remained calm, but Samuel felt a flicker of frustration through their bond. Humanity may be young by coalition standards, she said, but their ingenuity and adaptability are unmatched. In the span of a century, they've gone from planetary isolation to faster-than-light travel. They've accomplished feats that most species would consider impossible. Feats born of desperation, Vral countered. They've only advanced so quickly because their planet was on the brink of collapse. They're reckless. Samuel's hands clenched into fists. He opened his mouth to speak, then hesitated. What could he possibly say in a room full of beings who'd seen more of the galaxy than he could ever imagine? But Julie's voice echoed in his mind. Don't let him intimidate you. Samuel stood. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to meet Vral's gaze. Reckless doesn't mean incapable, he said. His voice sounded stronger than he felt. Humans take risks, sure, but that's how we innovate. It's how we survive. And yeah, maybe we're not as advanced as the Coalition, but that doesn't mean we don't have something to offer. Vral's ridges flared slightly, and Samuel couldn't tell if the reaction was anger or approval. You speak boldly for one so inexperienced, Vral said. But words are not enough. Prove your species' worth through action. Samuel swallowed. How? Before Vral could answer, another counselor, one Samuel hadn't noticed before, spoke up. This one was shorter and covered in what looked like feathers, with eyes that gleamed like polished gemstones. There is an upcoming initiative to test humanity's contributions to the Coalition, the counselor said, its voice soft but piercing. A joint expedition to explore a newly discovered sector of uncharted space. Perhaps the ambassador and her mate would like to volunteer. Samuel froze. Wait, what? Julie's gaze snapped to the counselor. That mission hasn't been approved yet. The region is unstable. All the more reason to test humanity's mettle, Vral interrupted, his golden eyes glinting. If Earth is to be part of the Coalition, its people must be prepared to face the unknown. Samuel looked at Julie, hoping she had a way out of this. But her expression was unreadable. Finally, she turned to the council. If the mission is approved, we'll consider it. Consider it? Vral growled. You'll join it. Unless your mate lacks the courage. Samuel bristled. I've got plenty of courage, he said before he could stop himself. Julie shot him a look, a mix of exasperation and reluctant admiration. Then it's settled, she said, her tone firm. We'll join the expedition, if the council deems it necessary. The council murmured among themselves, and Samuel sank back into his seat, feeling like he'd just signed up for something far worse than an arranged marriage. Later, back in their quarters, Samuel paced the room while Julie watched him from the couch. Do you have any idea what you just agreed to? She asked, her tone calm but edged with tension. I wasn't about to let that overgrown lizard call me a coward, Samuel shot back. Julie sighed. This isn't about your pride, Samuel. That mission is dangerous. It's not some diplomatic field trip. It's a high-risk expedition into uncharted territory. And you were going to turn it down? I was going to negotiate, which is what you're supposed to do in situations like that. Well, maybe I'm not a diplomat, Samuel snapped. No, she said, standing. But you're my partner now. And whether we like it or not, we're in this together. Samuel stopped pacing, his frustration ebbing. Yeah, I guess we are. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the day settling over them. Then Julie's expression softened. We'll figure this out, she said quietly. Samuel nodded. We'd better, because I think I just signed us up for a suicide mission. Samuel adjusted the straps of the harness, securing him to the sleek seat of the Coalition exploration vessel Alyssar. The ship's interior hummed with quiet energy, its walls glowing faintly with a soft bioluminescence that made everything feel alive. Around him, the alien crew moved with practiced efficiency, their various forms blending seamlessly into the ship's otherworldly design. It was the perfect fusion of biology and technology, but to Samuel, it just felt unfamiliar. This is insane, he muttered, pulling the straps tighter as the ship's engines began to hum with growing intensity. Julie glanced at him from the co-pilot's seat, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with Samuel's nerves, her smooth, blue skin almost glowing under the ship's bioluminescent lights. It's not insane. It's a test. And if you stay strapped in like that, You're going to look like you're about to pass out before we even leave orbit. I'm just making sure I don't, float out of my seat and hit something, he replied, gripping the armrests. It's not like I've been to space a dozen times, unlike some people. Relax, Julie said, her tone softer now. The crew knows what they're doing, and you'll be fine, Samuel. I've seen humans survive worse than this, like trying to explain why their planet still uses combustion engines. He smirked despite himself. Low blow. Before she could reply, a deep voice rumbled over the ship's intercom. Initiating hyperspace jump in 3 minutes. All crew, prepare for dimensional phase shift. Samuel felt a knot form in his stomach. Hyperspace. Sure, he'd written papers about theoretical propulsion systems capable of faster-than-light travel, but experiencing it was a completely different story. He tightened his harness again. Julie leaned closer, her violet eyes softening. Listen to me. I chose you because I saw something special in you. Not just your mind, but your ability to adapt. No matter what happens out there, you'll figure it out. I believe in you. Her words caught him off guard, and for a moment, the fear subsided. He gave her a small nod. Thanks for the vote of confidence. She smiled. Don't make me regret it. The Alyssar broke into hyperspace with a soundless flash. The familiar starfield outside the ship vanished, replaced by a swirling void of light and shadow that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. Samuel's stomach lurched, but he kept his eyes on the monitors, trying to focus on the readings instead of the overwhelming sense of vertigo. Hyperspace trajectory stable, Julie reported, her voice steady as she worked the controls. Good, came the captain's reply over the intercom. ETA to the uncharted sector, 22 hours. All crew begin mission prep. Samuel exhaled, the worst of his nerves starting to fade. He glanced at Julie. So, what exactly are we looking for out there? Unknown signals, she said, her tone serious now. The coalition picked up intermittent transmissions from the sector. Patterns we've never seen before. Could be a new species, an abandoned outpost, or something else. Something else? That's comforting. She didn't reply, her focus shifting to a display showing the sector's sparse star maps. Hours later, Samuel found himself in one of the ship's observation lounges, staring out at the kaleidoscope of hyperspace. He was trying to make sense of the jumble of emotions swirling inside him. Fear, excitement, uncertainty. Julie joined him, her presence grounding him in a way he couldn't quite explain. I can feel your thoughts buzzing, she said, her voice light. You're overthinking again? Hard not to, he admitted. One wrong move out there, and I could doom Earth's chance of being taken seriously by the coalition. No pressure, right? Julie chuckled softly. You're not alone in this, Samuel. Remember that. Before he could reply, the ship's alarms blared, sharp and piercing. All crew to stations. The captain's voice boomed over the intercom. We dropped out of hyperspace. Unknown anomaly detected. Samuel and Julie exchanged a glance, then bolted for the bridge. The bridge was a controlled chaos of activity as crew members worked at their consoles. The main viewport displayed the black expanse of normal space, but something was wrong. Dead ahead, a massive object floated in the void. A derelict ship, its hull fractured and dark. It's enormous, Samuel murmured, staring at the screen. Preliminary scans show no signs of life, one of the crew reported. But there's something odd about the energy readings. They're unstable. Unstable how? Julie asked, moving to the captain's side. The crew member hesitated. It's almost as if the ship's core is active, but it's not generating power. It's collapsing in on itself. Collapsing? Samuel's mind raced. Like a black hole? Not exactly, the crew member replied. It's more like. Before they could finish, the derelict ship lit up with a sudden burst of energy, blindingly bright. The Alyssar shuddered violently, throwing Samuel against the console. What the hell was that? He shouted, scrambling to his feet. Energy surged from the derelict, the captain barked. Shields are holding, but barely. Whatever that thing is, it's destabilizing the entire region. We need to pull back, Julie said urgently. If the energy collapse spreads, it could tear a hole in space-time. Wait, Samuel said, his gaze locked on the readouts. "Those transmissions, the ones the Coalition detected, they're coming from that ship." Julie froze. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's something alive in there," Samuel replied. "And if we leave now, we'll never know what it is." The captain hesitated, his gaze flicking between Julie and Samuel. "We don't have time to debate this," Julie said, her voice sharp. "We have to go in," Samuel interrupted. "We have to go in?" Julie turned to him, her expression a mix of frustration and admiration. "You really don't make things easy, do you?" He gave her a crooked grin. "Not my style." After a tense pause, the captain gave the order. "Bring us closer to the derelict. But be ready to jump if the core destabilizes further." The Alyssar approached the derelict cautiously, its lights cutting through the inky blackness. As they drew near, the ship's haunting size became clear. It wasn't just big. It was ancient, its hull marked with symbols that none of the Coalition crew could identify. Samuel's heart pounded as the docking clamps engaged, locking the two ships together. "Suit up," Julie said, handing him a Coalition-made environmental suit. "If you're going to charge headfirst into danger, you're doing it properly equipped." "Appreciate it," he said, pulling on the suit. The airlock hissed open, revealing the dark interior of the derelict. Samuel and Julie stepped inside, their footsteps echoing eerily in the vast, silent corridors. As they ventured deeper, Samuel's handheld scanner began to beep. "Energy signature's getting stronger," he said, his voice tight. "I feel it too," Julie replied, her violet eyes scanning the shadows. "Whatever's here, we're close." They rounded a corner and froze. In the center of the chamber stood a massive, pulsating core, its surface glowing with unstable energy. Around it were stasis pods, dozens of them, each containing a being unlike anything Samuel had ever seen. "They're alive," he whispered. Before Julie could respond, the core flared, sending shockwaves through the ship. The floor beneath them began to tremble. "We have to shut it down," Samuel said, moving toward the core. "You'll kill them," Julie shouted. "If we don't, the ship will collapse and take us with it." For a moment, their eyes locked, a silent battle of wills. Then Julie nodded. "Do it, but hurry." Samuel worked quickly, his mind racing as he deciphered the alien controls. The core's energy flared again, brighter this time, but he didn't stop. With a final, desperate move, he shut it down. The core's light faded, and the tremors ceased. For a moment, everything was still. Then one of the stasis pods hissed open. A tall, luminous figure emerged, its eyes glowing with an inner light. "Thank you," it said, its voice resonating in Samuel's mind. Back aboard the Alyssar, Samuel and Julie stood in the observation lounge, watching the derelict drift away. The luminous figure they had rescued had vanished, leaving behind only questions. Samuel turned to Julie. "So, reckless or brilliant?" She smiled, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "A little of both. But that's what makes you human." For the first time, Samuel felt like he belonged, not just on the ship, but in this strange, new chapter of his life. And for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. The end.